Before Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, or Sandra Bland, there was Oscar Grant. The current movement against police terror and for accountability and justice can trace its first iterations to this moment, when Oscar Grant was killed by a Bay Area Rapid Transit police officer on January 1st, 2009. Captured on numerous digital devices, Oscar's death would be the first murder prosecution of an on-duty Bay Area police officer. Before that would occur, however, Oscar would be murdered in the media and in the court system. It was a triple murder. No doubt, the murders of Oscar Grant tells this story.
Tis woman's strongest vindication for speaking that the world needs to hear her voice. Anna Julia Cooper wrote those words in 1892. You would think she's speaking about today. White supremacy and patriarchy, by definition, belittles and ignores the voices of Black women. Some of Us Are Brave, a Black woman's radio program, was a corrective to that, centering and airing the voices, views, and experiences of Black women, documenting them and capturing moments in time. The program aired on Pacifica Radio for almost a decade. Many of those voices have been preserved here, and Some of Us Are Brave, interviews and conversations with sisters on life, art, and struggle. Edited by Thandisizwe Chimurenga.
Greetings. Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Thandisizwe Chimurenga, and I am the host of Rootwork here on Black Liberation Media, coming to you from the void once again. I'm not coming from the void. I just got my camera off because y'all don't need to see everything I'm into over here. But I hope you are enjoying your Sunday afternoon, your Sunday evening. We are still in Black August. We are still studying and still struggling. And we are continuing with our readings from Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur, formerly known as Monster Kody, and The War Before by Safiya Bukhari. We've got today and next Sunday. We were doing these all throughout the month of August, Black August, every Sunday. Now, Black August, quote unquote, will be ending by next week, but we are going to continue what we have started. Black August is that time where we recommit. We should already be struggling. We should already be studying. We should already be engaged in collective study. But it don't start and end in Black August. We just recommit and redouble our efforts during Black August. So we're going to finish these works for however long it takes. I am committed to doing that. My commitment begins here in Black August. And besides, once we get into September, we can't ignore what September means coming out of Black August. September 9th, when the brothers of Attica prison rose up in revolt and stated that we are men, not beasts, and we refuse to be beaten and driven and such. And we must never, ever forget on September 14th, when the state of New York committed mass murdered 29 of those brothers and 10 of their own. We must never, ever forget, and we must always remember that the state, this system, this power structure, currently white supremacist, will never, ever hesitate to go through and destroy its own to get to me and you. We need to remember that, not just in August, but all year round. And we recommit ourselves to that struggle to not only raise awareness of the nature of this system, but to destroy it and replace it with something that is for humanity and for the planet. So I want to thank y'all for hanging out with me today to get our reading on. Is that Oil House? Hey, Oil House, how you doing? Hey, Brother Jamil, salam alaikum, how you doing? Greetings, greetings, snowman, peace to you. I'm here bearing witness on A2326. I love your passion for African people and what you do for us. Well, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. What's up, Roots and Bark? You drink your tea too early. Oh, okay. Greetings, greetings, greetings. Did somebody just thank you? Somebody just gave up the money and I ain't even started reading yet. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Anyway. Ah. Hey, Alayo, how are you doing? I'm assuming it's pronounced Alayo. Alayo. Red September. Red as in drenched in blood. But you know, we also have some birth dates in September. George Jackson's birthday is in September. And so is Geronimo Jijaga Pratt. Birthday in September. And I don't know why, but I always forget something around Steve Biko, September and December. I think one is a birth date and one is a murder date, but I get those mixed up, and that's not cool. I got to work on that. Greetings, peace. Howdy, howdy. How you bees? Is this a rerun? Where are the messages coming from? They're coming from the void, i.e., my bedroom. You don't have to apologize for missing the last two shows live. We enjoy having y'all here in the live, mixing it up. But you can always, that's the beauty of this, always catch it on the rerun, what you have missed or what you may have missed. So don't apologize. It's all good. Uhuru. Hey, sis, how you bees? Greetings. Onk Uja Seneb. Now, you were supposed to remind me what Uja means. Onk means life, Seneb means health. I don't want to get up here and uh, confuse stuff and say the wrong thing. So you got to remind me what that is. Hey, Brittany. Pronounce your name perfectly. Alayo. Alrighty. Good, good, good. He said, I'm here either way. Glad to have you. Good to have you. Good to have you. All right. Prosperity. Life, health, prosperity. I know that's right. I need a little bit of prosperity. Well, maybe not a little bit, a lot of bit. Anyway. Sam Styles? The Sam Styles of the film Black August? Sam Styles? How you bees? How you bees? Tell my sister girl I said, hey, glad to finally catch you live. Gonna be a good fellowship. Well, that's the plan. All right, now let's see here. I'm trying to acknowledge y'all. Trying to acknowledge y'all, let y'all know that I do see you. And you know how it is, text spicy. Once I start reading, I might not be able to get back over here into the chat. I'm going to check in to see if y'all still here with me, but I might not be able to interact. So I'm trying to get these out the way now. Absolutely. Hit the like, share, and subscribe button right now, right this second. Like the program before I finish, because you might get so caught up and forget, or you might get mad. I don't know. Subscribe, subscribe to Black Liberation Media and subscribe to Rootwork. And don't forget to share the links. Share the links. Share the links. Now, real quick, I noticed some messages do not appear for me in the chats. I think it's because it's set up for if you want to watch the show either on your cell phone handheld or if you want to watch on a laptop desktop. I believe it is broadcasting in two different mediums, but for some reason, I don't think your handhelds pick up on the live chat. But, I wanted to make it easier for people, if, feeling bad because they weren't able to, or It just didn't come out and didn't look right if you were holding it on your phone. So that's the reason for um, the two different broadcasting styles, and I think the chat reflects that. So, oh, you're on the laptop. Well, I don't know what to tell you. I told you I'm tech spicy. Hey, Jaman. All right, y'all, come on up in here. If I didn't get to you, my apologies. Apologize greatly for that. So, let us get started with Safiya Bukhari. Starting with Safiya Bukhari last week and this week because I don't give her enough love, or she hadn't been given enough love. I had been reading from Sanyika, and that was taking up most of the time. So, The War Before by Safiya Bukhari, put out by the Feminist Press, published in 2010. If you have not already purchased the book, please purchase the book. My understanding is there are free PDFs out there on the web, but as an independent author, I just played for you in the beginning the intro book trailers for two of my books. As an independent author, it would really help if you would buy our books. And you need to buy up physical copies of books anyway, because as I'm sure you already have heard, AI companies are buying up physical copies of books, training their models on them, then destroying the physical books. This might not be what we envisioned in terms of censorship and book burning, but it's the same thing. We will not be able to find some of these copies in the future unless you've actually got them. So buy the actual book, y'all. All right, that's enough of that commercial. I am going to begin with chapter 7, Safiya Bukhari's The War Before. This one is entitled Islam and Revolution is Not a Contradiction. This book was edited by her comrade, Laura Whitehorn, a white anti-imperialist freedom fighter. She says the notes for this chapter are Safiya's original notes. In some places, updated information has been added. The essay is undated. It was probably written in the late 1980s. And again, because I'm tech spicy, there are footnotes in both of these books, both Sanyika and Safiya's books. But I am not trying to do all of that because I'll end up cutting off the broadcast. So get the book and you will be able to read the actual footnotes that they are referring to throughout these essays. I became a Muslim, one who submits to the will of Allah, while in the Black Panther Party, and as a result of defending the rights of members of the New York Three, Anthony Bottom, now known as Jalil Muntakim, Nur Abdul Qayyam, formerly known as Albert Washington, and Herman Bell are the New York Three. As someone who had been reared in the Christian church and a family full of ministers and deacons, I knew the Bible well and had participated in the choir, usher board, and Sunday school in church. Damn, she sounded like she went to my church. Anyway, I had also been privy to a lot of things being done by people who were supposed to be, quote, saved, end quote, and, quote, going to heaven, end quote, that made me doubt the existence of God. I had decided that there could not be a God if these people were going to heaven and others weren't. It was Nur Qayyam, Albert Nur Washington, who inadvertently made me see things differently. When they were captured and returned to New York, the New York Three were housed in the Tombs. Now, the Tombs is the name. It might be the Manhattan House of Detention. I'm not really sure, but that's basically the name of, and I'm not even sure if it's the city or the county jail, but basically the jail, not prison. And it's not Rikers Island, obviously. So this is the jail in New York, the Tombs. People within and close to the Black Panther Party were criticizing and questioning how Nur and Jalil could be Muslims and revolutionaries, questioning their commitment to the struggle. I looked upon Nur as a mentor. As a matter of fact, I called him my teacher. So instead of joining in the criticisms of him, I defended his right to self-determination. I reminded those who objected to his being Muslim that we were fighting for the right to freedom and self-determination. I said, how can we talk about self-determination if we would deny someone their freedom to determine whether or not they want to believe in the existence of God? The debate became hotter and hotter, and to shore up my position, I decided to study the religion for myself. Noor turned me on to a book by Muhammad Qutb called Islam, the Misunderstood Religion. That book answered a lot of my questions about religion. It especially answered my questioning how there could be a God while people who said they worship him were doing the things they were doing. But it was reading the Quran for myself that made me decide that I wanted to seriously study the Islamic way of life. As I studied, I learned that Allah makes Muslims, man does not, which to me meant that simply declaring there's none worthy of worship but Allah does not make you Muslim. It is the intentions of your heart and your determination to struggle in the way of Allah that makes you Muslim. I read Surah 2, ayats 190 through 93, where Muslims are admonished to fight in the cause of God those who fight you, and fight them on until there is no more tumult or oppression. For tumult and oppression is worse than slaughter. So in 1971, in Sankore Masjid in Greenhaven Correctional Facility at Stormville, New York, I declared Shahada, testified faith, and determined that I would strive to stay and struggle in the straight way. I want to stop here real quick. I do not know the name of the imam under which Safiya studied, but somewhere out there in the world, it might be in Yuri Kochiyama's, for lack of a better word, things. I don't want to call it an archive. Uh, I'm sure she has an archive, but you know what I mean. It might be out there in those things publicly identifiable with Yuri Kochiyama. There's a photograph of Yuri Kochiyama and Safiya Bukhari with their heads covered. I do believe Yuri Kochiyama also took Shahada, a declaration of faith. I know that she studied under an imam in New York, and I know that she and Safiya were good friends from way back in the day. As a matter of fact, tomorrow is the anniversary of Safiya's passing, and at 4 o'clock tomorrow, 4 o'clock Los Angeles time, that's just 7 p.m. East Coast time, I'm not going to be doing a live Rootwork. I'm just going to be replaying when Yuri spoke in Los Angeles at a memorial that we had for Safiya Bukhari. So be on the lookout for that also. So, yeah, just wanted to throw that out there. Okay. Prior to becoming Muslim, I ate whatever I felt like eating, had the foulest mouth in town, and had no qualms about exercising my authority over others. Even after becoming Muslim, I still had something of a, quote, God complex, end quote. I had a tendency to demand that people live up to my standards for their life. And if they didn't, I relegated them to the back seat of life. There was no gray in anything, only black or white. There were no excuses for not living up to my expectations. I was the judge, jury, and executioner. I had learned that there indeed was a God, and Allah, here we go, Subhanahu wa ta'ala, glorious and exalted, was He, but I had not learned temperance, compassion, or forgiveness. Then, on January 25th, 1975, while a member of the Amistad Collective of the Black Liberation Army, I was involved in a shootout in Norfolk, Virginia. One of my comrades was killed, another was shot, and I was captured. My bail was set at $1 million on each of 5 counts. And on one of the counts, I was facing the electric chair. While the shootout was occurring and the capture was going down, I was on autopilot. I didn't have time to think, only to react. But when I finally had time to reflect, what kept going through my mind were all the things I had read in the Quran about the intentions of the heart and how, if those were correct, Allah would allow you to be victorious. I began to question Allah. Why? Why did you allow this to happen to me? Over the next 2 months, while awaiting trial in the Norfolk City Jail, while making salat prayer 5 times a day, while being kept in solitary confinement in the Bama cells, I have no idea what that is, but there's a note, I repeatedly posed this question. Finally, the answer began to come to me. Think ye because you say I believe, that you will not be tested in your belief? Even though I was having these conversations with God about why he was allowing this to happen to me, notice I was still wondering why me, I was not afraid. I still recognized that Allah was God, and as long as he was with me, I was not alone. My political convictions vis-a-vis the Black Panther Party and Black Liberation Army, my citizenship in the Republic of New Africa, and the struggle for freedom and self-determination were as strong as ever, maybe even stronger, because I had just seen firsthand what the state would do to a slave who dared to rebel. My belief in Islam as a way of life was becoming more solidified also. On the one hand, I was faced with revolutionaries who had problems with my being Muslim. On the other hand, I was being told by Muslims that in order to receive support from them, I had to denounce the Black Liberation Movement and my co-defendant who was not Muslim. All this was happening while I was in jail awaiting trial on a capital case. So, there have been times, as we say, this is a real struggle that she faced. I have heard and seen the same struggle. You can't be Muslim, or if you're Muslim, you need to put this down and you need to do that. And of course, people bring up Malcolm's quote that we need to put religion in the closet because we only gonna argue about it. And some people interpret that as get rid of your religion. Malcolm didn't say get rid of it. He said put it in the closet. He did not say to get rid of it. He said put it in the closet. This is about Black liberation, which is why he founded 2 organizations, the Organization of Afro-American Unity and the Muslim Mosque Incorporated, one who wanted to express their Islam or find a way to express Islam in their lives, and the other for people who are about the business of Black liberation, Black unity. So there have been folks who have absolutely said, if you're a Muslim, you can't do X, Y, and Z. And what I like to tell people who are struggling with that, I like to tell them about Safiya Bukhari and Sekou Odinga and Mutulu Shakur. Muslims who absolutely were committed to Islam and had a love of and commitment to African people, that they would fight and die for African people. And just as a side note, when Safiya says that her co-defendant was not Muslim, she's talking about Brother Masai Ehihosi. At that time, Masai was not Muslim, but he became a Muslim and an imam, a Muslim leader later on. There I go, running my mouth again. I didn't denounce anything or anyone. We went to trial on April 17th, 1975, and by the end of that day, we had been sentenced to 40 years each, and I was on my way to the Virginia Correctional Center for Women in Goochland, Virginia, known to everyone simply as Goochland. Being a practicing Sunni Muslim in prison was not easy. Being an Orthodox Muslim, a political prisoner, and a woman was unheard of. When I arrived at Goochland, I was placed in maximum security confinement on the pretext that there was no space available for me on the quarantine hall, where new prisoners were normally placed. The discipline of making salat 5 times a day and having Allah constantly in your remembrance is a wonderful thing because it enables you to deal with the madness around you. It worked for me in the Norfolk City Jail, and it continued to work for me in Goochland. I could take time out from the insanity of prison life to communicate with the things that centered me. I was still asking the question, why me? Why, why did you allow this to happen to me? Internally, I was trying to get the answer to that question. Externally, I was preparing myself for the struggle to maintain my political integrity while incarcerated in Goochland. I knew that the stated reason for housing me in the maximum security segregation unit was a lie because I had been in an empty cell on quarantine hall before I was brought to segregation. I asked for the rules of the institution and found that the only reason someone could be placed in this unit was for a violation of the rules of the Department of Corrections or the institution. I had violated neither. I told them that if at the end of the 21-day quarantine period I was not out of segregation, I would begin a suit against them for discrimination based on political beliefs and affiliations. I then settled back to wait out the 21 days. It was during the 21 days that my spiritual understanding began to kick in. One day the message came to me, quote, "Stand still and know that I am God," end quote. It kept reverberating through my head, quote, "I am omnipotent and omnipresent," end of quote. I didn't have books or anything else in my cell, so I had to wrestle with this on my own. This was strictly between me and Allah. I was reminded of the story of Saul on the road to Damascus when Allah knocked him to his knees and reminded him that he was God. I was reminded that I couldn't just declare there is no God but God and go on my merry way. That more is required of me. How y'all doing? How y'all doing? Y'all all right over there? Am I coming through? I don't see a whole lot in the chat. Y'all still with me? Somebody send me a black fist or a peace sign. Let me know. Is it still working? What is that? Done and none. What are you doing? Hey, Amil Carr, the one that be talking slick and greasy. I'm just messing with you. I'm just messing with you. Amil Carr. Amil Carr is a wonderful human being. Don't y'all be trying to start no mess now. All right. I see that y'all still with me. Over the next 2 years, both my political and my spiritual beliefs were to be tried by fire. In addition to being in prison with a 40-year sentence, I was also in constant pain from fibroid tumors. During my sojourn in the city jail awaiting trial, I had repeatedly been denied medical care. I had been told that I would be taken care of when I arrived in the state system. During my initial examination upon arrival, a doctor told me the tumors were the size of oranges and asked me how long my sentence was. I told him 40 years. He told me to come back to see him in 10, which is outrageous. I talked, if not last week, the week before, about Safiya and fibroid tumors and how I did not know at the time that that's the reason why she had escaped from prison, was to seek health care from because she would be bleeding so excessively during her menstrual cycle. A doctor telling you to come back in 10 years is outrageous and unacceptable, but it's acceptable in these prisons. Anyway, I had learned to incorporate Allah into every facet of my life, so I turned to Allah for guidance on this. My answer was, quote, "You go as far as you can in fighting this battle for medical treatment, and I will handle the rest," end of quote. So I followed the prison's rules. I filed a grievance. In response, I was told that the lack of medical treatment constituted a difference of opinion between myself and the doctor on whether treatment was needed at this point. Got to jump in here again. This is an example from prison, but of course, thanks to social media, we have everything is more amplified now. We're in corners where we hadn't been before. Things have been brought to light and been amplified more than they had before. The discussion around whether or not black women are believed, or black people in general, but when black women are believed, when we say to doctors what is going on with us, I've seen more and more discussion of that in the last 5 to 10 years than I've ever heard in my life. This ain't new. If you remember reading Asada's book, they told her if you feel something when you go to the bathroom and look in the toilet, it might be your baby, because she was pregnant when she was in prison. This ain't new, but it is magnified and amplified for women in prison. I filed a grievance. In response, I was told that the lack of medical treatment constituted a difference of opinion between myself and the doctor on whether treatment was needed at this point. On the spiritual front, I was struggling to get a halal permitted foods diet, to observe Juma Friday prayer, and to fast for the month of Ramadan. There were women in the institution who considered themselves Muslims but had never observed Ramadan because they were followers of the Nation of Islam. They also did not observe Juma or a halal diet. They also, for the most part, practiced homosexuality. What was I to do in this situation? Maintain the deen, Islamic way of life? Judge not the workings of others, but pull their coattail to what Allah says in Al-Kitab, scripture, and maintain the deen. Allah alone makes Muslims. I informed the institution of the requirements in practicing Islam, and I continue to do what was required of me. Here's another side note for you. Just as there have been some people in the Black liberation movement who said, hey, you can't be a Muslim, or you can't be spiritual, or you can't be in a religion and be part of Black liberation. And just like you have Muslims who say, hey, you can't be Muslim and be part of Black liberation, there are Muslims who say that the Nation of Islam are not real Muslims and that is not real Islam. That is not my struggle. That is not my fight. There are others who bear the scars of those battles and who are more equipped than I am to fight it. Moving right along. The first year I observed Ramadan in my cell, I was not allowed to have any meals after sundown or prior to sunrise. I purchased necessities from the commissary, and as the women in the institution observed my practice, they began to make things available to me. The next year, the institution made arrangements for me to observe Ramadan. It's extremely hard to maintain your principles, politics, and beliefs when all around you others are compromising and giving in to temptations. I watched as women who came into the institution at the same time I did, who had never been involved in relationships with women before, began to get involved. I too might have succumbed if it had not been for the mercy of Allah. I don't know what that means, mercy. Anyway, one of the things that hit me strongest when I submitted myself to the will of Allah was the knowledge that Allah is all-knowing, omnipotent, and omnipresent. Those were not just words for me, not just ritualistic sayings. It was and is a belief that is part of my core. I'm saying this because knowing that Allah is already aware of what transpired inside Goochland while I was incarcerated there. There is no need for me to lie to you. I forged friendships while I was there. I was tempted to form a homosexual relationship, but Allah is merciful, and the temptation was only a brief one. I had never been in prison before. I had never been alone so far from home. I was alone without a support mechanism. In my darkest hour of despair, Allah quickly let me know that I was not alone. I was never tempted again in that manner. I can truly say there, but for the grace of Allah go I. 2 years after entering Goochland, I escaped. Everything came to a head at one time. I had decided that I would wait for word on my appeal before doing what I had been trained to do. At the same time, I had begun to hemorrhage from lack of medical care for my ovarian tumors. I was in constant pain, hemorrhaging, and not receiving any medical care. Even though I had followed the prison rules, I still hadn't obtained any medical care. I had even offered to pay for the medical care myself, but the prison said no. I knew then that the only way I would get the medical care I needed was to go out and get it for myself. I made up my mind to leave the institution. I love the way these sisters just be making these statements. Like Asada said, it's time to go. And she left. Safiya said, I made up my mind to leave. And she left. What the planning, the mechanism, they don't tell us all of that. Like it just magically occurred. I know they can't tell us. I'm just saying. I made up my mind to leave the institution, but I prayed over it first. I needed to make my peace with Allah. I had gotten to the point where I truly believed that Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala, glorious and exalted, must be consulted in all things. While I was talking to Allah about my decision to leave, He showed me that I would indeed get away from Goochland, but He also showed me that I would return. On the evening of December 31st, 1976, I escaped. I was on escape from that date until February 21st, 1977. While on escape, I was seen by 2 doctors and told that I would have to make a decision to have an operation or to be in pain for the rest of my life. Operation as in hysterectomy. More than likely a hysterectomy at that time, 1977. When I was recaptured and returned to Goochland, I realized that one of the reasons I was incarcerated was that Allah had a plan for my life. You see, nothing happens without Allah allowing it to happen. 3 things were happening simultaneously in my life. I was being reminded of a khutbah sermon that Imam Rasul Suleiman had given at Sankore Masjid in Greenhaven when I declared Shahada. I believe, obviously, that is his name, Imam Rasul Suleiman, the Imam I had been talking about earlier. In this khutbah, Imam Suleiman stated that there were 3 forms of jihad or duty. The first was the internal jihad, wherein you struggle to change those things within that are incorrect. The second jihad is with your immediate family. The third is with the community. I was, and still am, engaged in the first jihad. I was learning that there was only one God, and that He is all-knowing, all-wise, and all-powerful. I was learning that Islam is not a religion that you observe only on Friday or when you're in the company of other Muslims. Islam is a way of life. You live within its tenets 24/7. Allah is constantly in your remembrance. At the same time that I was dealing with that jihad, I was reminded of the admonishment. I was reminded of the admonishment to, quote, wage struggle against tyranny and oppression wherever it may be found, end quote. The lack of quality or even adequate medical care at Virginia Correctional Center for Women was an issue over which to wage struggle. I determined that when I went to trial, I was going to plead not guilty to the escape charge by reason of duress and necessity, citing the lack of medical care and the fear for my life as the reasons for my escape. I also decided that I would represent myself. I received support from many people in preparing for my case. Some of the legal research was done by brothers who were locked down in various prisons across the country. The law library at Goochland was virtually non-existent since it was a women's prison, and the prevailing belief was that women didn't need a law library. Have mercy, Lord. I also received assistance from the People's Law Office in Chicago. I even received some support from some of the correctional officers in the prison. But the support that was most unforeseen and extremely appreciated came from the people of the town of Goochland who sat on the jury. During the course of the trial, I made the court aware of the lack of medical care at the prison. I subpoenaed witnesses who told of misdiagnoses, such as ovarian cysts in an ovary that had already been removed, sore throats that turned out to be cancer, and fibroid tumors that were really pregnancies. At the end of the trial, the judge instructed the jury that they had to deliver a guilty verdict because escape was like murder. Either the victim was dead or not. Either I was at the prison during that time period or I wasn't. Since I hadn't been at the prison during the time period in question, the judge told the jury they had to find me guilty of escape. The jury stayed out for a couple of hours. Then the judge called them back and told them that if they didn't find me guilty, he would hold them in contempt of court. What does that sound like to y'all? Anyway, they found me guilty, but sentenced me to only a year, not the 5 years they could have given me. Then they waited outside the court until I was brought through on my way back to jail. There, they apologized for giving me the year. We need to talk about jury nullification. Remind me to do that as a subject here on Rootwork and Black Liberation Media. I was also given the right to have an outside doctor handle my medical case. The institution later gave me a list of 3 doctors and said I could choose one from among them. The doctor I chose was a woman named Wanda. I don't remember her last name. She was on staff at the Medical College of Virginia in Richmond. I'd had a male physician who related to the women in prison as little more than animals, or as a means of obtaining a paycheck without having to be competent at what he did. Sounds familiar? I felt that I stood a better chance at receiving understanding and compassion with a female doctor at this point, largely because of the nature of my medical problem. As I said earlier, Allah was constantly with me throughout this process. I know this because when I finally had to undergo surgery to remove the tumors, I almost died. Allah stepped in and stayed death's hand. Here is what happened. I had just been sedated in preparation for surgery. I was strapped to a gurney, and the anesthesia was taking effect. I started choking on my saliva, but no one was paying attention. I tried to call out, but no one heard. I tried to signal and could not get anyone's attention. Then, from somewhere in the depth of my being, Allah gave me the strength to rise up against the straps that were holding me down. When the attendants saw what was going on, they rushed over and assisted me. I spent more than 9 hours in surgery. Later, when I came to, Wanda was still there, waiting to talk with me. I had asked her, before I went into surgery, to do what she could to save as much as possible. I wanted to have more children. When I awoke, she told me that the internal situation was so damaged that the only thing she could save was one ovary. I couldn't help but believe that if I had been given the medical treatment I needed in a timely fashion, this could have been avoided. But I was thankful for Wanda's ability to save the one ovary. There was one more thing I had to learn as a Muslim and as a revolutionary. From the day I became Muslim, I had been told about shirk, the assigning of partners to Allah, also known as polytheism. There is no greater sin than shirk, believing that there is someone or something more worthy of worship or fear than Allah. I thought I had that one down pat. I knew that there was no other God but the one God, Inshallah, illallah, illallah. I bear witness that there is nobody worthy of worship or of fear but Allah. The problem was that I also had an overwhelming fear, an uncontrollable and irrational fear. This fear superseded and overshadowed even my faith in Allah. What could that be, you ask? I was scared beyond reason of snakes. I keep going back to my capture in Norfolk and the things that went through my mind then. I knew I was facing the death penalty. For 30 days, this hung over my head. That didn't worry me. I was alone in a hostile environment. That didn't worry me. What worried me was how I would handle it if they attempted to use my fear of snakes to obtain information about my comrades and activities in the Black Panther Party or Black Liberation Army. I didn't know how I would stand up to that kind of interrogation. I knew how real my fear was. Was that, was it Animal Farm? See, y'all got to forgive me. I'm the memory. It was, what's the guy's name who, I don't even remember the guy's name who wrote Animal Farm. Lord have mercy, my memory. Anyway, what's the book and the guy who wrote it? Whatever that, there's a room that they take you to. And what's in the room is your biggest fear. So if your fear is snakes, it's a snake in that room. If your fear is water, it's a pool in the room. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Help a sister out. Anyway, I never thought about that kind of fear being shirk. I had never actually come face to face with a live snake before. I had seen pictures of snakes in books and had nightmares. I had seen pictures of snakes on television and had nightmares. I had even heard my mother and grandparents talk about snakes and had nightmares. My fear was all consuming. Prior to my arrest, I had seen the movie Thomasina and Bushrod. One scene in that picture showed one of the co-conspirators being dangled over a hole full of snakes to induce him to give information to help capture two black bank robbers. After he gave the information, he was still dropped into the hole with the snakes. I can still hear his screams. This movie made my fear even more real. After I was brought back from escape, I was again taken to the maximum security unit at the prison and placed in isolation. I was kept in this building in isolation and segregation for 3 years and 7 months. During this time, I went from my cell to the showers, my cell to the recreation area, either downstairs or in a room on the same floor, and in the last months, from my cell to another room on the same floor to work. One day, when they had taken me out of my cell for an hour of exercise, they took me downstairs. A metal door was locked behind you as you went through each section of the building. As we approached the area leading to the downstairs recreation area, I looked into the rec room. Under the television stand, I saw something coiled and black, with its tongue flicking in and out. I had no conscious thought and performed no conscious act. I reacted totally on instinct. I began screaming and running for the door. When I reached the door, it was locked. There was no way to get out. So I slid down the wall, curled myself into a fetal position, and kept screaming. It was as though I was outside my body, watching myself go through these machinations. I could not stop myself from screaming, nor could I get control of myself. There was no thought process going on, just screaming and the regression to the fetal position. I had sunk into the darkest recesses of my mind in an attempt to protect myself from my worst fears. My fear of snakes was clearly greater than my belief in and love of Allah. Somehow the guards managed to return me to my cell. I don't know how they dealt with the snake. When I had finally managed to calm down and was myself again, I knew that I had to confront my fear. The institution was not going to do it for me. No one was going to guarantee that I wouldn't have to confront a snake again in life. The only positive thing about this experience was that I learned that they could not use the threat of exposure to snakes to gain information from me. This confrontation had made me know that my reaction would be so elemental that there was no way anyone could use it to extract information. The other problem for me was much greater. My reaction to this fear made a lie of my statement of belief that there is nothing more worthy of worship or fear than Allah. Was not this fear, at its very essence, saying that snakes had a greater power over my life than Allah? How could I rationalize this fear of snakes without ascribing a partnership to God in this snake, or without deifying this snake itself? The resolution of this spiritual and intellectual conflict would do two things for me. It would deal with my fear of snakes, and it would resolve my problem of shirkism. Over the next month, I went back and forth between reading the Quran and making salat over this issue. I studied Hadith, the written traditions of the Prophet Muhammad, on shirk. I read the Quran on faith and the oneness of God. I wrestled with my belief. Finally, on a basic level, I concluded that nothing happens to us without the permission of Allah. This may sound simple and matter of fact, but it's not. There was an entire analysis and process I went through before this became real to me. For me, as a revolutionary, death was something I lived with daily and constantly. I enunciated clearly the concept that, quote, wherever death may surprise us, it will be welcome as long as this, our battle cry, reach some receptive ear and another hand reach out to intone our funeral dirge with the staccato of machine gun fire and new cries of battle and victory, end quote. In dealing with the government of the United States of America, I was very clear that they were just men and women, while Allah was God. Him alone should I fear. Then I thought about my reaction to the snake. If Allah is God, all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-wise, the arbitrator of the universe and creator of all things, then he created the snake. All things occur by the permission of Allah. If the snake should bite me, what could be the end result? Death. If in fact I had already conquered the fear of death, and in fact welcome it on the battlefield, then why did I fear the snake? After death, there is the judgment, the day of requital. The day, is it requital or requital? The day when we all have to give an accounting of our lives and be weighed in the balance. That is to be feared. The day when Allah will look into your heart and determine whether your good outweighs your bad. Shirk, ascribing a partner to Allah, believing that anything or anyone other than Allah is worthy of worship or fear, is a sin. The first pillar of Islam is to believe in the oneness of God. You can't be one and also have a partner. 1 and 1 equals 2. This undermines the fundamental pillar of Islam. As I worked this out in my mind and in my heart, I grew stronger and my fear abated until finally it was gone. I could truly say with conviction, with a rock solid belief system in place, there's no God but God, and Muhammad, peace be upon him, is his messenger. After I came home from prison in August 1983, the first opportunity I got, I went to the Bronx Zoo. They have a reptile house there. I had never been in one before, but I was determined to test myself and my belief. I walked into the reptile house and looked at all the snakes, walking throughout the reptile house, making sure that I took my time and observed everything. I emerged from that place with the courage of my convictions intact. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Allah, having no partners. There is nothing worthy of worship or fear but Allah. Now I can answer the question, why me? The process of killing off those things within me that undermine my ability to submit myself to the will of Allah, as well as to learn what Che Guevara knew early on, that a true revolutionary is motivated by great feelings of love, was a time-consuming process. I had a lot of plans for how I was going to conduct my life as a revolutionary. Allah had other plans. Now I conduct my life on the basis of two things. I follow the dictates of my conscience. I remember Allah in all things. If a thing is at war with my conscience, I don't do it. If it does not fall within the dictates of the Sunnah or Islamic custom, I don't do it. Then I remember the admonishments of Allah. It is incumbent upon Muslims to wage struggle against tyranny and oppression wherever it may be found, and fight in the way of Allah until tyranny and oppression is no more. End of the chapter, and those are the notes to the chapter. Y'all all right? Y'all okay? Y'all good? Now, I wanted to say something real quick. The editor, Laura Whitehorn, thinks that this essay may have originally been written in the 80s. It's undated. And Safiya's comments about homosexuality, as you can tell, even that language, the more popular term is same sex, right? So this was written at a particular time. What I want to say is this: it is important and incumbent that we do not throw people away because we do not agree with one or two things that they have said. I don't know of any discrimination Safiya engaged in against people who are gay or lesbian or have same-sex relationships. So, saying and doing are two different things. Saying things that people might consider harmful, doing things that people might consider harmful. Again, I don't know if she actually committed any actions that people would consider to be harmful. But I think it is imperative that as we learn about certain pillars of our struggle, heroes and sheroes, if you will, we study their mistakes, study their victories, study and learn and understand their analyses, the context in which they lived, died, struggled, etc. It is important that when we see things or come across things that we do not agree with, that we think might be principled and unprincipled and flawed, that we do not throw away the entire person. That is our charge, not to throw away the entire person. Because, some folk gonna feel a certain kind of way about what she said. Some folk feel a certain kind of way about the fact that she was even Muslim. There are different branches of Islam. She talked about the friction between those in the Nation of Islam, and she was Sunni Muslim. There are people who are Shia Muslim. And as a matter of fact, one of my spiritual teachers, who was not Muslim, African traditional spiritualism, He was someone, Metahochi Zanu, someone who studied all religions. It was he who taught me about the Muslims of Senegal, who do not pray to the east, to the Kaaba. They pray to and give homage to Sheikh, I think his name is Amadou Bamba, one of the Muslims who rose up against French colonialism in Senegal. And it is also Senegalese Muslims who live side by side with those folks who practice African traditional spirituality in terms of the Indep system. So, as Malcolm said, you put the religion in the closet, but you don't put it down altogether. It is a part of the human experience. It is a part of who we are. We're not going to cut off the part of who we are as we struggle not only to just be human, but to be free from oppression. If you are Muslim, join the struggle for liberation. If you are Jewish, join the struggle for liberation. If you practice African traditional spirituality, join the struggle for liberation. As I talked about in one of the works I did last year, the year before, a brother made a comment. He said half of the BLA was either Muslim or Yoruba, talking about African spiritual systems. So there is no this chapter was entitled "There's No Contradiction in Being Muslim and Being Struggling for Black Liberation." There should be no contradiction in struggling for liberation, unless, of course, you are following a colonized version of somebody's spiritual system. Oh, I see in there George Orwell. Yeah, that's who I was. How did I forget his name, George Orwell? Ooh, the amnesia is deep with this one. But at any rate, before I start doing too much rambling, it's like 80 comments over here. I can't get to all y'all comments. I hope y'all are working together because I can't do it. Y'all help each other out in the chats. Except for this one right here. You're afraid of money. Listen, a lot of people are afraid of money for the wrong reason. A lot of revolutionaries are afraid of money because they don't want to be turned into that thing which we hate, that thing which we are fighting. But we have to fund the revolution. 1984, Room 101. Thank you. I knew something. And why would I call it Animal Farm? That's crazy. All right. You are welcome, comrade. Yeah, as you can see, I'm over here late. Y'all, what made that comment how many hours ago? Oh, it's only been about 4 or 5 minutes. We have to be clear about all of our privileges, even as the marginalized people. We all have room to grow, absolutely. And this applies to those of us who are triple binded. Yes. Let's see. Not afraid of money. Just believe in black cooperative economics. Gregory Jones. Religion is the deification of a culture. Ashe, 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 sheo. Whose culture is being deified? Whose culture is the standard bearer? But I don't want to get all into that right now. I'm just saying, I am glad that this sister was on our side. I am glad she was on our side and not fighting against us. So, I am about to go get me a drink, juice without gin, because y'all don't need to hear me swigging. And I will be right back, all right? Let's take a quick 2-minute break, and we are going to go into the next chapter of Sanyika, because instead of doing 2 chapters of Safiya today and 2 chapters of Sanyika, we're going to get into this next chapter and hopefully spend a little time there. But give me a break. Let me go take a swig real quick. Be right back. Aight. Aight. What did I just say? Wait a minute, hold on a second. A measured dose of alcohol, to be honest. You'll take a swig for those who can't. Really? Really, Zen? Really? I don't know if they're going to appreciate that or not. But at any rate, I want to mention here in Stone, Virginia, I've been reading Stand Up on the Street. Really? Uh-huh. Okay. Okay, don't y'all start arguing over black buying power. Anyway. Two F's. How you been? Ain't seen you in a minute. We seem to have forgotten everything we learned about revolution. It's about the people. Ashe. Ashe. Oh. Share screen. Now I'm sharing the screen. Ooh, that looks terrible. I'm sorry, y'all. Let's see. I'm sharing the screen in the hopes that you can enlarge your screen and read along if you like, if you're able to. If you got this playing in the background and you multitasking, that's cool. But if you just want to stare at something on the screen, since I am not here, I am someplace in the void. I wanted to put it on the screen for you, but this type set is, ooh, Lord have mercy. At any rate, if you want to read along, there you go. Again, somewhere out there, it is available as a PDF, but I'm sure independent publishers, independent authors such as myself would greatly appreciate it if you would purchase the actual book. Now, this is the chapter from Sanyika Shakur's Stand Up Struggle Forward entitled Pathology of Patriarchy, a search for clues at the scene of the crime. I've been waiting to get into this one. And as I stated before, this book has footnotes, but in an effort to not be text spicy, I am not going to try and get to those footnotes. You have to do that on your own. All right, we're going to start out with a quote at 6:11 p.m. Sanyika Shakur, what we are going to do here is direct your attention to the pathology of oppression, but not simply as you are used to reading about it. The obvious points of contention will inevitably be touched on as they relate as attendant ills to the subject at hand. However, we will try to keep our focus and your attention framed on the issue in play. Please bear with us as we move along to connect the dots. We want to talk about homophobia, the fear and oppression of gays, lesbians, bisexuals, and transgender people. Interesting that this comes under the heading of patriarchy. And we want to discuss this because as revolutionaries, it is our duty to deal with all socio-economic and political phenomena that engages our reality, past, present, and future. The obligation of the revolutionary is to make the revolution. That is to change oneself, encourage the people to change, and then change the current system that oppresses. Of course, it would be ideal if in 2012, remember this book came out in 2013, it would be ideal if we didn't have to even deal with this matter. We wish that these issues had been resolved during the last high tide of consciousness, but sadly, that was not the case. And so here we are. No matter, the sooner begun, the sooner done. No, right on. We are learning as we go to recognize, overstand, isolate, and deal with maladies as they arise, but have just begun to tie all these into the oppressive matrix of patriarchy as the origin of major isms that crush, kill, disrupt, and destroy. as they oppress and exploit. It's unfortunate, but we're having to start from scratch every it's yeah it's unfortunate, but we're having to start from scratch every 30 or 40 years because we lack a continuity of consciousness in our struggle against capitalist imperialism. And while issues of sexism have been dealt with in large part by women, it's necessary to broaden the scope of the discussion of sexism to include homophobia and heterosexism. We are not in any way claiming to be experts on this issue. We are studying and struggling around the same things that most revolutionaries are, which is to say, we are looking for clues at the scene of the crime, trying to connect the dots as they relate to individual, national, and global oppression. We are, in essence, looking for ways to get free and stay free. Free, that is, from all forms of oppression. Here's the thing: if people are being oppressed because of who they naturally are, and we know this to be true, which may not fit into a patriarchal gender box, then this is due to a sex or gender issue. So we feel this still covers sexism. In other words, that patriarchy, male dominated systems of oppression, create categories for people to fit into in order to exploit and oppress. Therefore, so called genders then become classes. A class of men, the dominant, masculine, violent, God, father, king, president, boss, etc., and a class of women, the dominated, feminine, passive, Holy Ghost, homemaker, whore, etc. Oppression by sex is the oldest form of oppression on the planet, older than institutionalized theocracies like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Theocratic regimes institutionalize male dominant systems of oppression through laws, state bureaucracies, and social relations. In fact, men deal with women and children as they did livestock. Quote, nowhere is patriarchy's iron fist as naked as in the oppression of animals, which serves as the model and training ground for all other forms of oppression. Pathological progression of patriarchy. P3, or three Ps. Why is it necessary to speak about patriarchy if we are discussing homophobia? And why begin with the oppression of women and children if this is about oppression of gender outlaws? Well, what we have to do is a bit of excavation, some radical anthropology, if you will, because the fact of the matter is, we know that things don't fall from the sky or magically appear out of thin air. That's like his favorite saying, things don't fall from the sky. We are looking for connections, contradictions, and from these, we'll be rewarded with the truth of origins and the internal dynamics in the life process of the thing. The quote, thing, unquote, in this particular study is oppression as manifested through the system of patriarchy, which we contend is the origin of a vast array of other forms of oppression, which is precisely why we brought in the domestication of animals. We are learning that the same techniques used to domesticate animals were also used in the colonization of women and children, and eventually every culture they encountered. Breeding, birth control, castration, segregation, exploitation, and mass murder were methods learned first on animals and then on humans. And there was always a symbiotic relationship of know how used between the two areas of domestication, including their mass killing for capitalist markets and the mass production of commodities, such as cars, in the development of capitalist industry. And we go to a quote. In his autobiography, My Life and Work, published in 1922, Henry Ford revealed that his inspiration for assembly line production came from a visit he made as a young man to a Chicago slaughterhouse. I believe that this was the first moving line ever installed, he wrote. The idea of the assembly line came in a general way from the overhead trolley that the Chicago Packers use in dressing beef. And as a side note, what is the name of that book? Uh, Journalists, a lot of muckraking investigative journalists point to The Jungle. I believe that's what it's called, The Jungle. But the author is named Upton Sinclair. And he basically went to work in a slaughterhouse. I do believe it was in Chicago. Came out of that experience and wrote a book on it. And it caused, for lack of a better word, quite a stir. Look up Upton Sinclair. I told y'all my memory is getting shaky. I remember the author's name, Upton Sinclair. Now, if the name of the book is The Jungle, it might not be The Jungle, but it's something. Remember, Google's our friend. Capitalism came out of patriarchy, but we know that it is not exclusive to capitalism. It was a good old boy network before capitalism is recognized to have created modern classes. It was the same good old boy network under Soviet so-called socialism, and it was a good old boy network in the civil rights movement and to a large degree in the black liberation movement. Patriarchy positions itself above all as the reason, the answer, and the solution, all to the detriment of women and children. But that's not all. Patriarchy is a pervasive system of oppression that reaches far and wide into the minds and actions of all. It produces sexism, of course, but more insidiously, it relies upon its victims to perpetuate and promote it. Again, there's no magic involved here. These things are knowable, and it follows that if we can identify, expose, and challenge these things, we can defeat them or be defeated. And should we do nothing, this will most certainly ensure that things get worse. Oftentimes, we miss the boat on understanding the subtle ways we go about reinforcing patriarchal relationships in our daily lives, because domination is but one aspect of patriarchy. That's just the obvious aspect of it. You know, like when conquistadors pushed up in the, pushed up in the Inca Empire or the English vamped on India. The domination was obvious. But then came the missionaries, the laws, the state, the colonial culture. These caused the second corresponding aspect of patriarchy, dependency. The colonized were made to feel that they'd been chosen as subjects for a great, all-encompassing civilizational leap forward, that the invaders were sent by the Great Father in the sky, who'd sent word to the king, who in turn instructed the invaders to save the heathens from their wretched selves, bring them into the modern world by dint of cannon and bayonet if necessary. Quote, Aristotle maintained that man's domination over animals extended to slaves and women as well, another view that mirrored the political reality of the day, since human slavery and subordination of women were the norm in ancient Greece. In his Politics, Aristotle wrote that such, quote, uncivilized, end quote, people as the neighboring Achaeans, I'm not sure of that word, I'm not familiar with. I'm going to say the Achaeans and the Thracians, I am familiar with that one, quote, are slaves by nature, as the body is to the soul, or as beasts are to men, end quote. Aristotle believed it was as permissible to enslave people who did not possess reason as it was to enslave the common and, for the most part, live at random. Or live at random. Legitimized through longevity. The same patriarchy which first oppressed women after having perfected the methods on animals as inferiors went on to evolve into the Judeo Christian and Islamic institutions and theology. Hold on one second. One second. Institutions and theology that have scorched the planet today. This is why, in every major religion, God is a he or him, father, i.e., male according to gender, the last messenger, prophet, offspring, and the last one God supposedly spoke to. Yep, you guessed it, men. Coincidence? Natural? Not a chance. To make matters worse, as if patriarchy could even be content with one form of oppression, Euro supremacists went a step further than some unseen spirit in the sky. They painted a picture of their God, Father, Son in their image. They, in effect, became the prototype of the Son of God's image and thus placed themselves in the direct lineage from God Himself. Plato, Aristotle's teacher, created the idea of the great chain of being, which formalized the belief of the Greeks that they ranked higher than non Greeks, women, slaves, and of course animals. Quote, medieval Christendom translated Plato's image into a ladder which had God at the top and European Christian on the highest rung, a position that granted them a divine mandate as God's overseers and stewards to rule over the rest of the ladder below. The idea that European man, flawed and sinful though he might be, occupied a position on earth comparable to God's position in the universe became a central idea in the religious and philosophical thought of Western civilization regarding man's place in nature. Thus, Europeanism had virtually unlimited authority to rule the natural world as, quote, the vice regent and deputy of Almighty God, end quote. And because of this, quote, virtual unlimited authority, end quote, there's a very dark, wretchedly oppressed, and colonized woman in Bombay with a picture of a prototypical European man on her wall, who she believes is the Son of God, her Lord and Savior, who died for her sins. Yet, although he died for her sins, she is still paying a perpetual debt she never owed. This scene is replicated a million times over across the globe in homes, hovels, huts, churches, and prisons in every colony. The theocracies are heavily invested in the business of patriarchy, in domestication and colonization. And the colonial subjects respond with fealty and dependency. Women tell their sons to, quote, be the man of the house, end quote. Men tell their wives to, quote, stay in a woman's place, end quote. Men who show emotions are said to be, quote, acting like little girls, end quote. Women who exert themselves as humans are called dykes and bulldaggers or butch. Violence is masculinized and passivity is feminized. This is so because patriarchy has created two exclusive genders, two neat little boxes to insert all of humanity. This has been legitimized by theocracy and capitalism through longevity and a corresponding dependency by the masses on a grand distortion of nature itself. Y'all all right? Y'all still there? I know that was kind of rough. I may have lost a few folks after reading that one. The longevity we speak of here has to do with people divesting themselves of the responsibility of social investigation, of simply allowing abnormalities to persist without challenge because, quote, it's always been this way, or, quote, that's just the way it is, end quote. No, that's not just the way it is. It's the way it's been made. It hasn't fallen from the sky. There's that word phrase again. Or been miraculously blinked into existence. This oppression is man-made. Literally, it serves someone's interest. The people relinquish their power to oppression when they default on social investigation of curious and questionable systems. Patriarchy and its attendant ills slither on interrupted. Quote, patriarchy is a form of social organization that produces what we commonly recognize as sexism, but it goes well beyond individual or systemic prejudice against women. It is, first of all, the false division of all people into two rigid categories, male and female, that are asserted to be natural and moral. Patriarchy attempts to destroy, socially or even physically, anyone who does not fit into one of these categories or who rejects this, quote, gender binary. Patriarchy goes on to define clear roles, economic, social, emotional, political, for men and women, and it asserts falsely that these roles are natural and moral. Under patriarchy, people who do not fit into or who reject these gender roles are neutralized with violence and ostracism. They are made to see and feel ugly, dirty, scary, contemptible, worthless. I might also add dangerous. Patriarchy is harmful to everybody, and it is reproduced by everyone who lives with it. Weaponized patriarchy. Just checking. In addition to patriarchy going on to define clear roles for men and women, it also set in motion the ill definition of races. In creating itself first as a class of men to domesticate and rule over animals, women, and children, it was a logical progression of patriarchy to define, all humans as being of different races. For a plurality of races made it that much easier to justify, implement, and sustain Plato's earlier design of the great chain of being. Because patriarchy is necessarily hierarchical, it was but a short trip to the lunatic fringe of racism, though actually it was really Euro supremacy. To call it racism would, in essence, subtly reinforce the false social construct of a plurality of races on the planet, when of course this is not true. So we'll call it what it is, Euro supremacy, and Euro supremacy is also Eurocentricity. Though, just as patriarchy is not exclusively a capitalist thing, nor is it exclusively a European thing, it's a man thing. It is highly contagious and must be combated constantly. It fastens a sense of entitlement that lends itself to taking liberties with other people's lives and existence based solely on what is perceived to be difference. We focus our attention on Euro supremacy as an attendant ill or side effect of patriarchy because it was them, English, French, Spaniards, Portuguese, Dutch, Belgian, etc., who weaponized paternal relations in myriad conquests across the globe. He says glove, but I'm sure he meant globe. It was the British Empire upon whom it was said the sun never set. In other words, Its domination was global, and it is a fact that 99% of the borders between countries, nations, and states were drawn by European colonialism. What made Europatriarchy weaponized, aside from the obvious, was that it created not only races of others, but made itself a race, a white race, sitting atop the global food chain, the great chain of being, doing their father's work on earth. Whites' polar opposite became, of course, the blacks. Africans were made into the black race. Asians became yellow, and North American indigenous nations became red. Having already had a few centuries of practice domesticating animals, women, and children in Europe, it was but a small tactical adjustment to train their cutlasses, ropes, and cannons onto the colored people they encountered. The pivot was such that it needed only to hoist the same inferior attributes it used against its own people onto the indigenous cultures it smothered. Everyone was demonized and maligned as subhuman, animalistic, heathen, and in need of either elimination, colonization, or paternalism, genocide, oppression, or protection, i.e., dependency. In any event, all encountered cultures had to come under the influence of Eurocentric patriarchy, which is to say, the culture of the invaders, the crown, the religion, the laws. Social conditioning and gender placement was, in essence, the first human test run, the forerunner to genetic engineering. Grand patriarchy. People who do not fit into or who reject these gender roles are neutralized with violence and ostracized. Who are the people who would reject these gender roles? Certainly, they would be those who overstood patriarchy, colonialism, and who had a sense of self and kind so strong that they were determined to assert themselves and be natural gender outlaws, those who acted and thought outside of the box, the patriarchal gender box. However, when grand patriarchy came onto the scene as a weaponized Euro supremacy, all indigenous people, male and female, became inferiors. Indigenous men were domesticated under grand patriarchy, just as women had always been. And to ensure this, a constant, blatant, and open hostile state of terror and siege was used to blanket any notion to the contrary. Euro American supremacy smothered everything. Every male, not a European, became boy, buck, son, or worse. They were explicitly forbidden to look a European male in the eyes. Grand patriarchy recognized one man, the European male. This was eventually utilized in the colonization of every encountered culture of the planet. But not even this form of pervasive oppression eradicated patriarchy among those dominated. Oppressed men, those forbidden to be, quote, men, end quote, under grand patriarchy, still would oppress oppressed women. Thus, women felt a double blow of oppression under grand, on a national level, patriarchy, and minor patriarchy, individually, in personal social relations. What's more is, this individual patriarchy, now sexism, was compounded with the introduction of the colonizers' religion into the mix as a chain of control. Western religion in the colonies became a force multiplier for patriarchy, another weapon used in the war. Once indigenous men had been taught that this new God had given men dominion over women and children, these fell further down the great chain of being, as created by Plato and reconfigured by Euro Christians. Women too, however, reciprocated this travesty by believing this foolishness to be true, making it that much easier for their oppression to continue. I have always said, If women decided they had had enough, patriarchy would fall within about less than 24 hours, probably, maybe less. But isn't it odd that the same religion that propelled the Euro supremacists out of Europe and against the world in a war-driven culture of conquest made the people they encountered docile and meek? Instead of the indigenous males using the Bible to oppress women, they could have used it to push back against the invaders. So what happened? It was perhaps the overwhelming military ability of that time. In any event, in a paradoxical twist, the colonized people reinforced the grand patriarchy with a spiritually ordained patriarchy of their own, even at the bottom rung of the ladder, even under old colonialism, where it is said that whole nations become as classes, the ills of patriarchy persisted and found expression, though hardly to the extent it did on the grand level. Still, patriarchy in neocolonialism. Class, gender, race, and bourgeois law all stem from patriarchy. The illusion that men, i.e., the father, knows best. To ensure this doesn't escape anyone, man created religion in his image as well and endowed God with all the human attributes of a brutish man: jealousy, greed, vengeance, indifference, callousness, and authoritarianism. When it's said that, quote, God created man in his image, end quote, it's actually the reverse of that. Man created God in his image. Class, gender, religion, race, and bourgeois law, homophobia and heterosexism too, are all created of patriarchy. These, to look at it in another way, are the walls constructed in the global mansion of patriarchy to keep the Great Father safely sequestered away from those buried under the floor, in the closet, used as domestics, maintenance workers, and beasts of burden. I need to grab another swig, juice without gin, but I'm not going to take no 2 minutes. Hold on one second. Beast of burden. To escape the gender box is, in essence, to become an outlaw of sorts. For one's escape from such restrictive confines is a protest for one's ability to be natural, out and away from the stifling confines of patriarchy's colonialism. But to protest is but one side of the equation. To protest is to go away from for self's sake, an overstandable thing, but to rebel is to go against the malady in an attempt to destroy it. Protests are usually nonviolent, a tactical method using hope as a morality play on power to have it change itself. Rebellion, however, is an active and often violent lunge at the power's heart to start the bleeding and stop the breathing. I like that. Start the bleeding and stop the breathing. But even this is but a tactic and must be educated if the action is to bring about change. Under old colonialism, gender outlaws were smashed on by church and state. Sharp-shooting ideologues riled up the masses to reject abnormality for morals superior to such deviance. Old colonialism, the general representative of patriarchy, used to push a line of gender authoritarianism. Even on a socio-economic level, old colonialism, squatting dominantly over internal colonialism, however, has changed everything, but altered the perception of most things in order to continue to hold its empire together and reap benefits from oppression. The U.S. ruling class has, in its new and enlightened age of neocolonialism, come out as the main protector of civil rights, against sexual, racial, and religious discrimination. It bills itself as the force to make all citizens equal. Of course, the paradox here is what we must focus on to find the truth. You see, because as the ruling class goes about claiming to be interested in protecting civil rights, it is in actuality promoting and reinforcing patriarchy. It's the tactic of problem, reaction, solution. It's a Machiavellian ruse of traditional statecraft. Patriarchy created gender, which begot sexism that leads to sexual discrimination. Patriarchy created race, which begot racism and leads to racial discrimination. Patriarchy created religion, male dominated theocracies, which leads to religious discrimination. In other words, the very problems the masses are running to the state, the representative of grand patriarchy, to solve, the state created and will then offer a solution to, which without question will only strengthen the grip of patriarchy. It's the symbolic reapplication of the ties that bind, which keep the masses tethered to the machine. Orwell, anyone? How could I forget that man's name? George Orwell. Patriarchal contamination. Seated so close to the epicenter of empire, patriarchy, and all that this entails, we are without question thoroughly contaminated. Cross-pollinated social interaction and conditioning has exposed us all to such a degree that we can hardly recognize our sickness. It all seems normal and natural, doesn't it? That's because we've gone to the colonialist schools, been socialized by its mass media, the propaganda of its many wars, even those against us, bourgeois elections, its culture of arrogance, smugness, and indifference, etc. Because of this, and our inability to make sense of it, we act as unconscious shock troops of its colonial edicts when confronted with ideas and actions which appear to run counter to its mores. Being homophobic is one such thing, and of course, racism is another. The animalized names the dominant culture has used to denigrate us, all with, we'll turn around and use on each other and ourselves to justify a sense of difference in imitation of patriarchy. But you see, the neo or new colonialism doesn't mind if its patriarchy is being imitated. That's a plus for it. That means it's working. It means people aren't trying to stop it. They are trying to like it. They don't want to end patriarchy. They want to be card-carrying members of the club. Have you seen the ex-correctional officer, rapper Rick Ross, with his shirt off? The idiot has huge tattoos on his torso of U.S. currency, complete with Franklin's face, Jackson, and Jefferson. He wants in so bad, he's a walking billboard. Quote, "We'll beg for membership," end quote. That's how patriarchy stays afloat and operable, by being legitimized, replicated, and practiced by the unconscious masses. Neocolonialism has found it expedient to ease up on the blatant authoritarianism and to let the colonial masses, quote, "do their thing," end quote, as long as it is within the established framework of the game of bourgeois law and order. So while breaking out of the gender role is objectively wrong in the eyes of the patriarchy, it hasn't the time nor inclination to pursue such outlaws at this time. Actually, what the state has done under neocolonialism is act as if it's okay, and it has gone on the offensive, trying to assure the people that all is well. First, it was smash on sight. Then it was don't ask, don't tell. Now it's come on in, grab a gun, and help defend the empire. Same way it did with New Africans, Mexicanos, Puerto Ricans, and indigenous nationals. Remember that? Sure, it went like this: old colonialism, black codes, Jim Crow, segregation, civil rights, and neocolonialism as integration. Those who refused to join the club were what? Neutralized with violence and ostracized. Today we call them martyrs, prisoners of war, political prisoners, and exiles. Those who joined, we call neocolonialists, petty bourgeois, sellouts, and collaborators, enemies of the people, or as Black Agenda Report has taught us, the Black misleadership class. The choice is now ours. What are we going to be? Projectiles for the people or projectiles against the people? That is the question. Neocolonialism has put the colonies on autopilot, and the masses have been confused by this, thinking that they are somehow on a flight towards freedom. Because the establishment forces aren't actively smashing on what used to be obvious causes for reaction, the people think a general sense of new freedom has blanketed the situation. Oprah has her own TV network. Jay-Z wines and dines with Warren Buffett. Magic Johnson owns the LA Dodgers. And Rock Bottom is in the Whitest House. Again, that's Sanyika's name for Barack Obama. Rock Bottom. But the usual reins of state control and reaction have not been relinquished. They've only been delegated to accommodating intermediaries to run the flight plan for the ruling class. The coordinates have been programmed into the console. The flight is on autopilot. Those the masses think are in control are only maintenance workers and sky marshals, flight attendants, and observers, as the jumbo Dreamliner continues uninterrupted across this neo-colonial terrain of war and class American style. In this era of neo-colonialism, the main homophobes are the masses themselves. Where it used to be the state, the church, and other rabid ideologues of patriarchy, now it's athletes, rappers, and the idiot down the tier who somehow feels as if his so-called manhood is threatened by how or who another person lives and loves. The unconscious shock troops of patriarchy become gatekeepers for their oppressors. That's why patriarchy can feel so comfortable with putting the colonies on autopilot. The inmates have assumed control of the asylum, and all is well on the Western Front. Never mind that the very culture of oppression that they are holding up by becoming little oppressors themselves is the actual threat to them. It's an Animal Farm trip, really, or a Stockholm Syndrome type of situation where the entity doing you the harm you sidestep to attack the one on your side while loving your tormentor. Psych meds, anyone? All right. I'm going back in. Y'all still there? Y'all all right? Yeah. All right. Y'all still there with me? I guess I'm still coming through. Harmful to everybody. To overstand homophobia and heterosexism as oppressive tools of the patriarchy is to come to grips with one's own reality, a reality that shouts its existence not from the confines of your own head or intellect or even your culture. It's a reality put on you by an offending order of parties who wish only to control and exploit you to their delight and benefit. Those, quote, shouts of reality, end quote, we speak of are from a distance of centuries past, and their antiquity gives them an air of prestige and legitimacy. But you mustn't be fooled, for this is the culture that ripped apart your ancestors. This is it. It's shinier now, has more pixels, and is in high definition. But it is the same culture that pushed up on those shores and was mistaken as God. It is the very same system of control, too. The gatekeepers' complexions have changed. We can see the madness through the lens of BET and Univision now instead of just CBS and NBC. But look carefully and listen. It's still the same old thing: patriarchy, class, gender, race, colonialism. The slings and arrows aimed at gender outlaws today are the same ones that were flung at us were flung at us when patriarchy first drove up. We were the abnormal ones then. And now, what? We've become so normal, American, that we are oppressors too? We've been Americanized to the point where we can't even recognize we aren't even ourselves anymore. Yeah, American me. Uh-oh. Here we go. Uh-oh. Hold on. Why are you tripping? Okay. I don't know what just happened. There we go. In men's prison, whereas prisoners, the only women are trans women, the concentration of the patriarchy pathology is on steroids. Even in those prisons without trans women, as patriarchy is also homophobia and heterosexism, it finds expression in this way. Whether through predation or hate outright, ill vibrations play out against gays or trans prisoners as invariably they are referred to as punk, faggots, bitches, etc. The hierarchical structure of prison groups preclude any form of socialization or respect with or towards gay prisoners. They are treated as abnormals, as less than human. They are usually neutralized with violence and ostracized. Groups forbid their members from aiding any such person. And even though the prisoners are placed with nationals from oppressed and colonized nations, oppression and prejudice against gays and trans prisoners goes on interrupted as patriarchal morals are imitated and replicated across the board. The odd thing, though, one which the odd thing, though one which points up the patriarchal reality in vivid fashion, is in most prison cultures, the only party in a gay encounter that's considered gay is the one assuming the so-called passive or feminine role. The masculine one, the top, is considered the man, which somehow excludes him from being gay or bi. It's his prerogative to fuck something, huh? And much like sexism out in Babylon, where the woman is considered lesser than, so too it is in prison with the gay or transgender prisoner. Though more so, since the homophobia and heterosexism is driven by the morals of religion. Of course, patriarchy escapes mention altogether. Nevertheless, the pathology of patriarchy plays itself out even in the most oppressive situations imaginable. Hmm. Yeah, that's a leap of logic, isn't it? That's a stretch. You not gay, but you doing what gay people do. Okay. The fact of the matter is, we can talk about this until we're out of breath, but until gays and transgender prisoners and people at large take their lives and existence into their own hands, organize and defend their reality, they'll continue to be victimized and exploited. Remember, this was written in 2012 or 2013. That goes for any form of oppression. The oppressed have the responsibility to get free. Freedom is not given or granted, it's taken. The federal government is not going to legislate your safety into existence. The prison administration cannot, nor will it, protect you from hostile homophobes or predators. You have to organize yourselves in concert with methods that reflect your reality. We know that in the state prison at Walla Walla in Washington, the Revolutionary Comrades organized Men Against Sexist Shit mass to combat homophobia and heterosexism there. Interjecting real quick. The oppressed have the responsibility to get free. Freedom is not given or granted, it's taken. The federal government is not going to legislate your safety into existence. The prison administration cannot, nor will it, protect you from hostile homophobes or predators. You have to organize yourselves in concert with methods that reflect your reality. The Angola Three, Albert Woodfox, Herman Wallace, and the other brother whose name has now Robert King Wilkerson, Albert Woodfox, and Herman Wallace. Only Richard King, excuse me, what's King? Robert King Wilkerson. Only Robert is alive. We lost Herman and we lost Albert. Before Albert passed away, he did write his memoir. There have been books written on the Angola Three, interviews that you can find out here in the world. The Angola Three, named for three brothers incarcerated at the Angola Penitentiary in Louisiana, the penitentiary that used to be a plantation. The majority of the enslaved Africans on it were from Angola, i.e., the name Angola. At any rate, when I was first learning about their case back in the day, they formed the Black Panther Party chapter in prison. And one of the things that they did was that they organized and protected prisoners against rape inside of the prison. They would stop prisoners from raping other prisoners, which is only one of the reasons why they were feared and hated by the prison authorities. Just like rape is a weapon of war in the war-torn countries, just like rape is not about sex, but is about domination and control, a terroristic act out here on the streets, rape is used in prison as a means of control. It is the fear of rape that is used to, quote unquote, scare people straight. Everybody has heard about the joke, don't drop the soap. Everybody has heard about it. Some people have told that joke. It is in magazines, newspapers. It is on television. It's in movies. It's in people's comedy routines. Don't drop the soap. And if you've never heard that by some reason, or don't know what that refers to, I'll let somebody explain it to you. And don't think that women aren't raped in women prisons, but we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about the men. Yes, rape has been used as a form of control by prison authorities. And it ain't just the prisoners that would rape other prisoners, if you understand what I'm saying. Back to the reading. Revolutionaries should be on the front lines of combating all forms of oppression. We have to organize with the oppressed to strike for freedom, or the neo-colonialists will organize them against us and continue on. Actually, okay, that was the end of that chapter. I was going to say real quick, jumping in again. If you're paying attention to the news, then you heard in the last few months about Israeli soldiers raping Palestinian prisoners, detainees, raping them themselves and using dogs to rape them. This has nothing to do with sex. It's all about humiliation, domination, control, and terrorism. And it is a feature of patriarchy. Now, having said that, I got 7:02. We usually go, or I said we was usually going until 7:30. Yeah, I don't think we're going to do all that today. I think we're going to take a break. And I think we're just going to just take in, marinate, meditate on the two chapters that I read today from Safiya on the contradiction or not having a contradiction between being a Muslim and being a revolutionary, and Sanyika on the pathology of patriarchy, the search for clues at the scene of the crime. I don't know if it's because I'm tired or it's because this was some rough chapters, but I am worn out. Ugh. So now I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go over here to the chat and see if I can keep up. I doubt I can keep up, but I'm going to see what's happening over here. All right, I'll start with this. Safiya Bukhari, we seem to have forgotten everything we learned about revolution. It's about the people. Ashe. Done and None. Was that MFSB? No, it wasn't. Guess who it was? I'm not going to tell you. Well, I might tell you, but I'm not going to tell you. I might tell you. I don't think I'm going to tell you. But just guess. Just guess. Yeah. Thank you. I figured out let me incorporate some of that in here. Liven it up. Or maybe not liven it up. Have a nice little groove. When you look into the void looks back at you. Stop clowning. I usually work on Sunday nights. Okay, well, like I said, put this on in the background. Have something to do, something to listen to while you are what do you call that thing? Multitasking. Sanyika wrote how many books? I don't know about the articles. This book, of course, was a compilation of his essays. Some he just, like George Jackson, some he just mailed to some people. But unlike in George Jackson's time, he probably did write these for publication. His first book was Monster, Autobiography of an LA gang member. Then he wrote a novel called Thug Life, which I have not read, unfortunately. And then he wrote this book, Stand Up, Struggle Forward. So, 3. Sooner begun, the sooner done. I first heard Sundiata Acoli say that in his book, The New African Prison Struggle, A History of the New African Prison Struggle. The way kindergarten was set up to educate children was apparently based off work with horses. My Lord. Good Lord. Now, remember, Henry Ford was responsible for those 2 books of those great and titles of anti-Semitism. One of them, he either produced one, wrote one, or I don't know. He's associated with one of them. The International Jew. Now I done forgot the other one. The Protocols of Zion. Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion and the International Jew. Yeah, Henry Ford. Yeah, I think it is The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. That book scared people. They say that book did for workplace conditions and the conditions of how food is cared for. They say, who is they, right? They say that book did for that industry what Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin did to the cause of abolitionism. I wasn't there. I'm just telling you what people said. So there you go. I think Sanyika was one of the most mysterious revolutionary scholars ever. I think about how he navigated his final days, and he's really a rare occurrence. And as I said, if not last week, the week before, I think I'm just now no longer angry at him for leaving us, but I'm still saddened, still hurt. It didn't have to be that way. It's very unfortunate. He still needs to be here with us. I wish he was here with us still, but he did leave those 3 books. And at least Monster, this book doesn't, well, Thug Life, the novel, is probably unheard of, but this book doesn't get as much love as Monster does. It should, but Monster continues to help brothers navigate the same way that Autobiography of Malcolm X has helped black men navigate for years. You know, Asada's autobiography has helped a lot of sisters navigate. So, he's still doing the work. He left us something to continue to work, even though he is not physically here with us, which I really, really, really hate. But, I'm dealing with it. The Greeks that were celebrated are disgusting. Yep. You ain't gonna get hear no argument from me. Appreciate my wordplay. Okay, of course I don't remember what it was. I know it was clever. I just don't remember what I said. Okay. Y'all be having these other conversations over here. I'll be trying to stay. I'll be trying to keep up. I wonder if livestock and pets have been given greater value than women, as had been done for children slaves. Well, as it seems today, you got a segment of people who would much rather deal with animals than human beings. And I'm sure there's reasoning behind that, something psychological as well as economic and political. I'm trying. What are y'all talking about over here? Y'all talking about school? I'm not in the education arena, so I'm going to keep my mouth shut. Shoelace. Schools. Yeah, rock bottom. Yeah, this brother, I'm telling you, brother graduated from, I keep saying junior high. He graduated from sixth grade, and that was it. That was it. When you read Monster, Autobiography of an LA gang member, he starts off talking about how he graduated from the sixth grade, and later that night, he was initiated into the gang. And I don't remember him mentioning school ever again in his book. I don't remember him mentioning it. I don't think he went to school, but anyway. Dr. Amos Wilson said, "We are a creation of the white imagination." Yeah, that's what people people mean when they say the Negro is a creation. Hmm. Oh my God, how many comments y'all got over here? Y'all just be, good Lord. Y'all make it hard for a sister to try and keep up. I'm trying to, okay, alrighty. I'm trying to, be interactive, but I can't hang with y'all. Rape culture is pervasive in all aspects of society. Yep. I do not need no rum. Thank you very much. Okay. I can't believe somebody gave you Monster in elementary school. I hope it did more good than bad. Yeah, this show is a lovely addition to your Sunday routine. Good. I'm glad to hear that. That's what I was hoping. This overlaps with Orisanmi Burton, Tip of the Spear. It would have been amazing for Sanyika to talk to Dr. Burton. I agree. It would have been amazing. Now you getting me upset again. I sure wish it had happened. I sure wish he had been here. But anyway, not here. Yes, Henry Ford was a sociopath. Yeah, he was a rabid hater of Jewish people. Hmm. Yeah, Henry Ford was he was something else. The mass slaughter of animals is the number two biggest polluter. Y'all remember during COVID, all those farms where all that food was going to waste, and the farms, a lot of the farmers finally said, "F it, we'll give it away." That's usually frowned upon. Hmm. Yes, Angela Davis's autobiography, and she's got a whole book on, I think, okay, everything. I'm just forgetting everything. Women in prison, and of course George Jackson looms large during Black August. Soul Dad Brother, but more importantly for many people, is Blood in My Eye. And one thing I noticed about George, as well as Sanyika, is the emphasis on the military aspect, the armed struggle aspect. So, yeah. Some people are reading Blood in My Eye in groups for Black August in particular. And again, we got about another week or so left in Black August. If you can find a group online, if not in your actual area, that is reading and discussing, because I'm pretty much just reading. This is not really discussing, but a group that's reading and discussing George Jackson's Blood in My Eye, you should get into that. Yes, he did partake of. Unfortunately, it was unfortunate. I think that had to do a lot. Well, he turned to substances to deal with his problems, and the substances created problems. So you know how I go. You know how I go. I thought Monster was the youth adult book about a kid in Harlem. No, not quite Harlem. This needs to be done more than just in August. Agreed. Agreed. And as I said, I'm committed to finishing. We'll probably be finished with Sanyika next week. I'm not sure. I'm only doing one chapter tonight. But even if we are, there are several more chapters in Safiya's book. I'm committed to finishing this on Sundays. I'm not sure what's going to happen with my Monday show. But at any rate, I'm going to continue to finish these chapters. And after these two books are finished, if folks want to, I started to say partake of, if folks want me to read other works, we can discuss that later. But I just wanted to at least get this out here during Black August. Oh, looks like I came to the end of the comments. His name in the 8-Tray Crips. Yeah. Oh, there was a monster in Harlem? I don't know who that brother was. Yeah. I didn't know that there was a one in Brooklyn or Harlem. But then again, they got, Pookies and Ray Rays all over. Why don't they? Why wouldn't they have a monster in another city? But anyway, you all are appreciated. I appreciate y'all for hanging with me, for putting up with me, even though I am in the void. You're listening to my melodious voice, but you're not gazing upon my beautiful face. So I appreciate y'all hanging for that. That means you are interested in the substance and not just my pretty face. So I appreciate that. I really do. Hey, Amilcar, you hung around to the end, huh? Where'd you go? Where's it at? There you go. Peace, Amilcar. Thank you for hanging out. Would you be interested in reading and then critiquing the Man Not book? I was supposed to have some folks on my show who shall remain nameless. I'm not going to out them just yet. They might be listening in, who were going to talk about the book. They took one for the team and read it so that many of us did not have to. And they flaked on me. I'm using the F word, flaked on me. So that book does need to be gone over, but I don't know if and when I'm going to get to it to answer your question. Oh, well, I appreciate and love you too. Thank you. And now, if y'all don't mind, I'm going to get the heck on. That's what I'm going to do. It is 7:18. That means we out of here 12 minutes early. So go do something. Go start something on Netflix that you can binge later on. Go kick your feet up. Go to bed early. Do whatever it is that you would have been doing at 7:30. Now you got 12 extra minutes to do it. Again, I thank and appreciate you all for hanging out with me on a Sunday afternoon, evening. Again, tomorrow I'll have that show up 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. East Coast. A video I came across several years later of a program we did in Los Angeles where Yuri Kochiyama spoke at a memorial for Safiya Bukhari. So other than that, y'all enjoy the rest of your evening. Stay safe out there, and I will catch you later. Peace.
Nothing in Deborah Jones's formative years could have prepared her for life in the US organization. Like many of her generation, she was Black and proud before the phrase became popular. She believed, and still believes, in the principles for which the organization stood. But her life took a horrific turn on Mother's Day 1970, leaving her in trauma and in silence. In this never-before-told account, Deborah Jones's inspiring story is told. What We Stood For: The Story of a Revolutionary Black Woman, by Deborah Jones and Thandisizwe Chimurenga, is the compelling and harrowing memoir of one woman's experiences in a leading Black power organization.
Black Liberation Media is a collective of Black and African organizers, journalists, academics, and media personalities serving Black and African masses seeking to further grow in their understanding of themselves, their histories, and the African world through entertainment and news. Please continue to like, subscribe, and donate to the channel so we can further serve you and liberate our people. You can also go to blkliberationmedia.org, get some merchandise, and also become a Patreon member and a member from the YouTube. Please do what you can, share, and show your love as we will show ours for you. Black Liberation Media.